the vegan author. So, what on earth is COP24, and should we really even give a damn about it? Well, it's the informal name for the 24th conference of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. The first of these conferences was held in Berlin in Germany back in 1995. So you kind of would think by now there would be some awesome climate initiatives in place, wouldn't you? Ha! Over the last 23 years, the delegates have just wasted a whole heap of time and have come up with diddly squat to helping the ever-increasing major concern we should all have regarding this planet of ours. Probably the most famous conference was held in Kyoto, Japan. It was number 3. So, by then the delegates had, some semblance of order, like where they sat and what they had for lunch. But it was at this particular one that they all agreed to the Kyoto Protocol, which really was just another fancy way of saying, we'll rob Peter to pay Paul, and we'll look good in the process. They did agree that there had to be some reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, and so they came up with the idea that countries would be able to do emissions trading using units. Oh my God, well that worked out well, didn't it? Let me give you a very simple example of what this means, right? So company A is an oil company. It has to either reduce its greenhouse gas emissions, which it won't do. Well, if they do, it's very, minuscule. Or they buy units to cover the greenhouse gas emissions, okay? Company B is a large forestry company, and it earns emission units for the trees it's planting, which is good for the environment. So over time, Company B gets more units because the trees are maturing, right? So this gives it an excess of units, and they then can sell these spare ones to Company A, the oil company. Now the real kicker is that a country can buy and sell these units to and from other countries. So pretty much everything stayed the same. In some countries, the emissions actually got worse. But hey, they were buying units to offset the increase from surplus credits from around the world. Somewhere like, Brazil, who had put in huge areas under environmental protection. I'm talking about the Amazon here. This meant that added credits they could flog off around the world. So then in 2015, the conference was held in Paris, France, and negotiations resulted in the adoption of the Paris Agreement. This was just an agreement that members keep the increase in the global average temperature to well below 2 degrees Celsius and limit the increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Each country has to determine, plan, and regularly report on its contribution. Highfalutin talk. This Paris Agreement doesn't come into effect anyway until 2020, and one of the very first things that President Trump did was pull the US out of it. Now, USA and China are the worst polluting countries. He doesn't believe there is global warming and has increased the oil and coal mining. Okay, so let's jump to COP24, held in Poland. It began on the 3rd of December in 2018, didn't close until the 16th, a couple of weeks later, mainly because they were finding it difficult to agree on things. Now, no surprise there at all. You see, there was a total registered of 22,771 registered participants. Now this included 13,898 people representing specific parties, 7,331 from observer organisations, so they didn't actually have anything to say. They just observed. But they were people like scientists, business groups, non-governmental organisations. Plus there was just over 1,500 journalists. So actually number of party delegates who could kind of like vote, etc., was about 14,000. 14,000 people. There was 197 countries. I'm surprised they were able to be in the same room as each other, some of the countries, because they were warring, right, outside of this room. So the fact that they took 2 weeks to agree on pretty much nothing is a real testament to everyone looking out for themselves, the economic repercussions that would happen if they went too far outside the comfort zone. Their governments would not be pleased. So all they agreed on was to put the Paris Agreement into practice. Pretty much everything else was unresolved. Now during this sham, a young 15-year-old girl, Greta Thunberg, I think I've pronounced her name correctly, stood at the podium and delivered a speech that was right on the button. It was a blistering attack of those men and women who hold the power. She told them, "You say you love your children above all else, and yet you are stealing their future in front of their very eyes. Until you start focusing on what needs to be done rather than what is politically possible, there is no hope." I'll leave you a link to the full speech. Please watch it. It's not long at all, but it's a very powerful speech. So climate scientist Kevin Anderson after that tweeted, "On climate change, Greta Thunberg demonstrates more clarity and leadership in one speech than a quarter of a century of the combined contributions of so-called world leaders. Willful ignorance and lies have overseen a 65% rise in CO2 since 1990. Time to hand over the baton." Greta was there. She was representing Climate Justice Now, a global network of climate activist groups. So even though she and her family are vegan, she didn't mention the animal agriculture at all, which we know generates 14.5% of global greenhouse gas emission and uses about 70% of agricultural land, and is one of the leading causes of deforestation, biodiversity loss, and water pollution. All she asked was, from now on, we leave the fossil fuels in the ground. Nothing will change. It's all for show. Our own Minister for the Environment came back with wonderful news that the delegates had reached an agreement. Oh, please. It's just the same as it was before. Carbon trading. These units. Ha! And the goal is to reduce the emissions by 2020. That's only 12 months away. It's not going to happen. Supposedly, countries will find it harder to wriggle out of their commitments. But hey, just watch them. If it's going to hit them in the pocket or upset someone, they'll wriggle. It's been scientifically proven that adopting a vegan diet will have transformative effects, including reducing greenhouse gas emissions by an average of 6.6 billion metric tonnes. That's about 49% reduction. But which government is going to be radical enough to demand their population give up meat, milk, eggs and fish? No government will, because they don't want to be unpopular. Plus, the majority of those in power are carnists themselves, and they refuse to see the environmental benefit of veganism. I'm going to say that I'm optimistic and believe we can fix this. In the meantime, buckle up, people. We're in for one heck of a ride. And now it's time for the wee bonus fact. I mentioned earlier that Brazil had vast tracts of rainforest under protection. It has been a leader in its biodiversity conservation. Well, after the change, after just recently, there has been a change in government, which happened a few months ago, and their new president has said that he wants to open up parts of the Amazon for mining. Now, there is a proposed law that will repeal the legal status of newly established protected areas if there is land ownership conflict, which is a very common thing. Now, if this law is passed, it will affect all future protected areas and many current ones, and this will impact on not only the Amazon, but Brazil's huge marine protected areas as well. It will impact on wildlife, sea life, and the ecosystem, as well as the native tribes who live in these areas. If the new president gets his way, the deforestation rate, which is already on the rise, could nearly triple. We have to love our environment and protect it. That's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, hitting that notification bell. And if you want something else to check out, have a look at the next video. That's it. Remember, have great food, make it whole plant-based, and be compassionate to all animals, including humans. Bye for now.